My Lords, I feel I should perhaps declare my position as a former Times headline writer, from which I'm able to confirm that the headlines very often do not reflect the nuance of the story, or indeed quite often the facts of the story. However, I rise to make a modest and short intervention in this enormously powerful debate. One of my chief reasons for doing so is to reinforce a point made by the Noble Lady Baroness Smith of Basildon in her presentation of her regret motion. The Noble Lady said this bill is, quote, opposed by the widest possible political coalition, close quotes. And my remarks today come after a close consultation with the Green Party of Northern Ireland. The words are my own, but I received from the Green Party of Northern Ireland a very clear message, as reflected in the words of the Noble Lady Baroness Ritchie of Downpatrick, that this bill should not go forward. That's also the message that I've personally received here in meetings with victims' families in Westminster. I also note that we're focusing on the bill, but we are actually debating a regret motion to a second reading. Now, in my 3 years in your Lordship's House, I've taken part in many debates, something the whips often comment upon, but I've never seen this form before, and I think that's a reflection of the general feeling of the House. Now, I will acknowledge, as have many others, that the Noble Lord the Minister has approached this debate in a conciliatory spirit, has clearly expressed his personal position, and I think the House collectively has thanked the Noble Lord for that. But that does not get us away from the fact that the government is putting before us today an unacceptable bill, and that's the view that's been expressed around your Lordship's House and indeed around Northern Ireland. An amnesty is not the answer. There is no appetite for it in Northern Ireland from victims, from veterans, from political parties and former police officers. An amnesty is the negation of criminal and civil liability. Linking the avoidance of prosecution to any truth recovery body, any truth recovery mechanism, undermines the credibility of that body. The problem is not the awkwardness of its title, much as the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery is indeed a terrible mouthful. But I think, again speaking as a former journalist, often when you see awkwardness in expression and explanation, that's an indication of underlying problems with the whole approach. Now, the Noble and Learned Lord Judge said that this is a bill that allows murderers to get away with murder. Now, I'm going to speak personally here because I'm still recovering from processing in my own mind a visit last week to Ukraine, to Kyiv, to Bucha and to Irpin. That's where I saw unmistakable evidence of war crimes and atrocity. Now, I am not, to be absolutely clear, making a comparison between the conflicts, but what I am making a comparison between is two societies with a burning desire for justice. In Ukraine, the international community and the Ukrainians themselves, even in the midst of an attempt to wipe their state off the face of the earth, something we've seen with increased hideousness even today, the Ukrainians and the international community are making strenuous efforts to document crimes, to collect evidence, to ensure there is a possibility, however distant, of future justice. The UN Assistance Mission told me at the weekend a precise figure that it had reports of 47,700 potential war crimes. Now, that desire for justice, to ensure full legal acknowledgement of what has happened, as the Noble Lady Baroness Ritchie put it, is a reflection of the impact on ordinary families, on people's lives, and that cannot be forgotten no matter how many years have passed. And I was particularly taken by the words of the Noble Lady Baroness Ritchie talking about the impact of family loss on a 6-year-old boy. And actually on the sleeper train back from Kyiv, I actually shared a compartment with a Ukrainian family with a boy of about that age. And you could see the impact that the war had had on that child's life, and that will obviously continue right through their life. And that's what we're looking at in the Northern Ireland situation today. And I bring that in particularly also because I think it's important that we consider that we're operating in an international context where the rule of law, human rights, are under concerted attack. As the Noble Lady Baroness Ritchie and many, many others have said, this bill is, from independent sources, being judged as a breach of Article 2, right to life, and Article 3, freedom from torture of the ECHR. Now, it's not my place, or I would suggest this House, to propose alternatives. As the noble lady Baroness Smith of Basildon said, the way forward must be found with the support, with the full input of those affected. More, I would say that the solution has to be co-created with them. It's often said, indeed I've had this said to me in these discussions, well, if you're going to oppose this, you've got to come forward with the way instead, you've got to provide the solution. Well, I don't think that that is something that your Lordship's House can do, and the noble Lord Hayne said this bill needs to be completely rewritten. And I agree with the sentiment, but I would propose that this is not something that the government is now, particularly now, in a position to do, starting from where we are now. This needs much broader, much wider, much more democratic input.